What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 83rd episode of the Balanced Business Podcast. As always, it's Larissa, Justine, and Nico. And guys, I didn't get the memo that we're wearing gray today, so I don't know what's going on. No one.
Yeah, I guess we should have caught you up.
Yeah. Gray on the Fridays, not the vibe. But team, how are we feeling?
Feel
Feeling
pretty
good.
good, honestly. It's like the first day in Phoenix that it's been like cool-ish. The high for the day is only 106, which is really
Oh
good for
yeah,
us.
not bad at all.
No, but we got the humidity, so we'll see. We'll see. Tentative.
Yeah,
So,
TBD.
but we got something very interesting, and stick around to the very end because I'm excited to launch something that we've seen work really well for our landscapers. So we're excited to share what we're doing there. But team, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about how to use data and technology to really streamline your business and your services to make it just overarching better for everyone involved, your employees, your clients, everyone. So there's kind of an overarching question that every business is trying to answer, which is what does the customer need and what can we do to help solve slash provide value for that client? So how do data and technology help answer that question?
There are so many ways to help, you know, uh, and I'll take a step back. I don't necessarily think data and technology helps get the answer to that question. What I think data and technology does is it streamlines the process so you're able to provide a really good customer experience every time. Just leaves a little bit less to chance. That's really what data and technology can get you. Because even if we think about things on like a really, rudimentary level, let's say you just you want to reach out to a bunch of people. Well, the old school way would be like you sit down and you handwrite a bunch of letters and then you mail those all out and you wait like weeks and weeks and weeks and see who gets back to you. Now, the new age version of doing that is you write one email template. You maybe create a spreadsheet list of all the people you're going to send it to and their basic contact info, and then you just have your email template get filled in variables that you define. So you write it once and then you send it, and then instead of waiting weeks for people to respond, people will start responding that same day or the next day. Within 48 hours, you should start seeing responses. So data and technology, they definitely streamline services, but they're not going to identify the problem for you. They may help provide a much more effective solution than what you could do manually, but they're not going to answer that question for you. So I think that's one big piece is like if we're trying to, figure out what does the customer need, what can we help solve, how do we provide value, those questions all need to be actually thought of first. Like that's something you need to take, to yourself and really figure out the answer. And then data and technology can help streamline that process to solve maybe issues you have or reduce redundancy or reduce mistakes or just make things faster, right? That's the role data and technology has.
Yeah, and it's kind of taking a further step back, right? It's I heard this super long ago, and I think it's very pertinent to where we are now. Probably heard this back in 2019. You got to figure out what do I eliminate, what do I figure out what to automate, and what do I figure out what to delegate, right? So like the first couple of things are pretty interesting. Is what can I eliminate right off the bat? Like what do I don't need to worry about. And there's so many elements that can go into like elimination, but to Larissa's point, automation is a great thing, and she's kind of a master at that. So I'm not even gonna pretend to step on her turf. No pun intended there. But yeah, it's very interesting what's happening, but you gotta answer the question like, why does it matter, right? Like if you're gonna add data and technology to something that doesn't matter, then great, you build something that is now better and faster at nothing. So just something to high level keep in mind.
Yeah, so with that question roughly kind of I think like high level gone through, which is that you need to go through and figure out what you need data and technology for, how they're going to enhance your business before you implement them. That's really important. And sometimes it can be just a really small thing where you're like, my office staff member, we consistently have to manually enter leads that we get into our CRM. Well, it can be really simple to just go through and be like, oh, well, maybe we can just use an automation to get that put in and then you don't have to worry about it. So there are little simple things you can do. But I think what's really important is to look at your services from point A, like very, very starting point, all the way to when you're fulfilled and figure out what does that customer journey look like? What are the pieces that are really important to not automate or to not systemize or that need to be done manually? And how do you build systems to prioritize those tasks versus, trying to figure out how do we get it 100% from A to Z automated, which, in probably 99% of cases, you probably do want a human touch somewhere. However, from A to Z, there's probably a lot of steps that you don't really need to waste the time or resources on to have somebody do it manually. And that's always the question you're asking as a business owner is, where is it worth spending resources? And that's the ultimate thing we have, right? We only have so much time. So once you have your customer journey completely mapped out, then you go in and you start kind of chopping it up into saying, okay, this is like phase one. How do we get phase one to be a super smooth process for the customer? And that might still include manual touches. It might not. It just depends on your process and how you do things. But how can you get the customer through phase one in a really effective, concise way that they find really helpful to be able to go through? It's super clean, very easy. You put that into place, and maybe you are using a software to help get them from point A to point B, And then once you have that particular chunk defined, then you go on to the next chunk and the next one and the next one, all the way down the line until you have a relatively optimized customer journey from start to finish. And then what you do is you go back to the beginning and you do it all again. And you just keep doing that. It's kind of a vicious cycle.
I think one thing that touches at every step in that journey is, your employees. So how do you make sure your employees know how to use all of these data points and like keeping them informed on all of your automations and how to use them, everything like that? What is your advice there?
I'll be honest, this is something that's hard. And everyone here can attest that I am not perfect at this and that I make a lot of mistakes in this particular area and that I set something up and I don't tell somebody about it because I'm like, nobody else is ever going to have to worry about this. Like, I don't need to explain this to anybody. If there's a problem, I'll fix it. But then that day comes and then there's a problem. And then nobody but myself is equipped to handle that problem because I didn't do the steps needed to fill everybody in. But on the things that I've found, people need to be working in and day out, effective SOPs are really important. And I'm sure everybody on my team would probably agree that my SOPs could maybe be better from time to time as well, So I'm saying this all with a very self-aware lens that like these are areas everybody can always be improving. But yeah, just really good, very clear SOPs. One thing I find is that if you are creating an SOP for your staff, just break it down 100%. Explain everything in as much detail as possible because it's much easier for them to say like, okay, that was more information than I needed, but I got what I needed, than to say, I still have no clue what's going on. So I would say over-explain, and then it makes it a little bit easier to be able to give to someone else who maybe has less context or is new or whatever, and then you can give that same SOP over and it will give them the context that they need. I think a good rule of thumb is every SOP you create, you should create with the intention of being like, can somebody in a different language understand this? Or where maybe English isn't their first language. Like, is that understandable? Could somebody take this instruction set that I'm giving them and do it 100% without me? Or what other questions might they have? Or what's the best format for this to be in? Sometimes just a video is fine. I am not a big believer that like everything needs to be like way, way, way over explained. Sometimes just a video is fine. But if it's a more in-depth process, you might want it like a fully written out, step A, do this, screenshots, everything. and all down the line. And it's tedious to create those, but they will pay dividends. It makes it a lot easier to be able to delegate tasks on your team and for your team to be able to understand, at least on like a base level, what's going on. They may not understand every single intricacy between every single technological implementation that you set up, and that's okay. That's fine. They probably don't need to. But as long as people can get at the high level of like, I think this starts here and ends here, and I'm pretty sure this is how it does it, that's fine for most of the time.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple things. So Larissa mentioned SOPs. Someone might be like, I don't even know what an SOP is. SOP is a standard operating procedure. So really, really popularized by the automation age, V1, which was the Industrial Revolution. So do this, then 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 do this. So that's what a standard operating procedure, SOP, is. Second thing that Larissa mentioned that I want to take note of was she mentioned that she could do better. We all can. But I think the broader focus is on the mindset of automation. To your point, how do you train employees? Well, you can train them on exactly do X, Y, Z, and that's where SOPs work well. And that's a good version 1. But version 2 is, can people adapt the mindset of automation to what they do? Because most likely you're not doing the tasks that you are or have them hired to do. So they might need automation for problems that you don't even know that they have problems to. So that's the only thing I would add there is, yes, SOPs, standard operating procedures have those, but also one thing that I think Larissa does really well is the automation training. It's like actually explaining why we do the things that we do and why we want to automate this. Because as soon as you can do that, there are whole fields that you don't even know that you should address that can be addressed with the right mindset.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, right? That's when we get into this next piece about like the big question is, how do you know what to streamline, and how do you know where to implement data, and how do you know where to implement technology? And although that's a much more complicated and nuanced question for every individual case, on the high level, data can really tell you a story from start to finish to help you make insightful decision making. What you can't measure, you probably can't improve. So being able to keep track of those everything basically relatively closely on a data perspective is really important to optimization. So I would say if you have nothing in place, you should start first with collecting data, because that makes it a lot easier to be able to say like, that number looks a lot different than it should. Maybe I should look into that, and maybe that's somewhere I should fix first. But you kind of need that benchmark data to really make good decisions. So I always say start there. Start with having a good database that can tell you this is a problem, this is not a problem, and then to be able to go in and fix from there. So getting really good. And when I say data, I mean, I'll give a super simple example. If you are sending out, I'll just go with the same example I did earlier. Let's say you're sending out emails. If you're sending out 1,000 emails and your end goal is responses, what data do you need to be tracking, right? Really simple question. If you're sending out 1,000 emails and maybe your goal is 5 responses out of 1,000, well, I mean, that's not a super high percentage. That's 0.5% of all the emails you sent. However, 5 responses out of 1,000 emails is honestly not like that bad considering cold email. So how do we get there, and how do we optimize our operations along the way to tell us where we need to make changes? So that's where if you start looking at other metrics that might help get you to those replies that you're looking for example, like open rate. How many people opened your email? Well, probably a lot more than replied, but probably a lot less than you sent. So that's a pretty big gap there. If you sent out 1,000 and 500 people opened them, 50% of your emails were opened. How do you get that 50% to 51%? Because maybe having 510 people open your email gets you from 5 responses to 6 responses. Those are the types of questions you need to be asking yourself, and that is why having benchmark data is really important. because A, not only can you measure your successes, but again, you have that benchmark to be able to say like, oh, this is maybe where I should start. So I always like to say break the process down, track the data along the way in each individual piece, and then you can tweak and figure out like, okay, let's fix this number over this next week. And then one little caveat I always also think is important that everybody forgets, sample size and time. Don't forget about those two things. Nothing happens in a day. If you're collecting data on all this stuff and it's been like 24 hours, well, it's not really enough time for you to make a decision on it. And this changes for every business. I like to do things week over week to say like, oh, last week this were our results. This week let's try to hit this. And to do it week by week instead of day by day, just because it's a lot easier to like make sure you have appropriate sample size and appropriate time to be looking at complete data. And those are things to think about as well.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on before we close it off? I know, Nico, you had a little thing you wanted to talk about. I don't know if you want to do that now, but
Yeah. Unless Larissa, you have any closing remarks.
I could talk about data and technology and operations all day, so I'll talk about that as long as you guys let me. I will leave everybody with these final thoughts. You can find a lot of savings for your business in the operations. So that's where you might have a really good process, and if it's working now, great. Get your benchmark data and start finding places to tweak, finding individual numbers that you want to improve to hit a certain direction, or get all your baseline data to just be able to monitor and be able to spot issues while they're still small before they become really big. That way you can fix an issue that affects maybe 1 to 2 clients versus all of your clients. Or, just to be able to find things before they become a really, really big major crises. You want to avoid those. Those are not fun. And data and technology can help you there. So start by looking at your whole process, understand your customer journey, take everything in chunks and get baseline data to then just improve individual metrics week over week or, in whatever sample size and time frame is appropriate for you. I'd say if I had to give like a very, very basic sentence of how to do like operations optimization, that's how.
Absolutely. Yeah, and what we've noticed a bunch of stuff happening with even internal resources, and sometimes there's a weird thing that humans do where they need to sleep, or sometimes they're not working 24/7. So what we have, and by we I mean Larissa's developed, is a bot, after hours bot that can help actually book and meetings and have conversations with individuals that are leads that are coming in through website or numerous places. Can actually keep a conversation going. So we are piloting that. It's the results are very, very good so far. So if you're a landscaper, turf installer, and you're struggling with getting people to actually book calls, automation is a great way that we've figured out that you don't need to be sitting by the phone 24/7. You can have something else, in this case technology, help using data to actually cause a desired effect, which in this case is meetings. So team, thank you so much for the podcast. So fun, so entertaining and educational, and we'll see you guys next episode. Peace.